Hello and welcome to Effin Hormones. It's the podcast about perimenopause and beyond. It's me and my three mates, Bina, Terry and Helen, keeping you informed about what's going on in this crazy old time of life. And trying to have a laugh where we can too, because you and I know sometimes the way to get through it is to indulge in a bit of dad humour. Yes, we're all looking at you, Terry.
Sort of.
Dad jokes.
I was going to say dad jokes, dad humour. There's a slightly sinister ring to dad humour. Anyway, I'll shut
You haven't
up.
seen my dad dancing, have you?
Hey, but you went to Cafe Mambo, didn't you?
I did.
Oh, yeah.
You did a
Bit of
daytime
bit of dad dancing.
raving thing that we were talking
Yeah,
about last time.
Daytime rave.
Go on, how did it go?
It was great. It was good fun, actually. It was like a rave that started at 4:30 and finished at 10:30. So yeah,
Brilliant.
it's like.
Did you get some glitter on?
I got like one of the fake tats on my arm. Did you not see my glitter jacket on Facebook?
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I had a glitter jacket. I looked like when the sun
You've got
went
a glitter
down,
jacket?
I looked like a disco ball because it was I borrowed one. I obviously don't have one, do I?
I was going to say I'm going to Ibiza in July. Can I borrow your glitter jacket?
It's not mine, otherwise I would say yes gladly. But apparently you can get them on Amazon.
Damn.
But yeah, it was great fun.
jacket. It's my birthday next week. I want a glitter jacket.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we could just buy one for all of us and
Yeah,
we'll just
share
share
it.
amongst
Yeah,
us
we'll
on
have
the
the
rare,
effing hormones.
Yeah.
on the very rare occasions when we go raving.
We'll get it on the back, effing hormones, a bit like, like a biker jacket with the thing on
Yeah,
the back.
like pink ladies.
Ladies, that's it, effing hormones. Glitter jackets.
Effing
oh, we
ladies.
should totally do some merch.
Effin ladies. This could catch on. I'm liking this idea.
I know, me too.
It's got legs, girls.
Anyway, we rudely interrupted your intro,
Sorry,
Emma. Do
Emma.
carry on.
Oh, yes. So I should probably tell you what's happening shortly.
Yeah, you should say as you're the host, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, what's happening is, in this episode, you're going to hear Meera Bhogal's story. Now, when she started experiencing perimenopause symptoms in her early 40s, funnily enough, she wasn't taken seriously at the GPs and was given antidepressants, which is becoming a very familiar story here to us at Effin Hormones. Meera says it was a lonely time because menopause just wasn't talked about. She's now really passionate about raising awareness of menopause, particularly amongst South Asian communities. So you're going to be hearing all about that in this episode. First, though, they've already rudely interrupted, but let's hear from the gang. Hi, girls.
Hello.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Whoop, whoop.
Big fish, little
And Bean
fish.
is joining us from a very glamorous location tonight.
I am. Well, I'm eating big fish, little fish. I'm in Whitby.
Nice.
She's in Whitby.
Whitby. I'm in Whitby.
And tell everyone what happened to you this afternoon.
Well, I arrived and the first thing I wanted to do was go get an ice cream and walk down the pier. And 2 licks into my ice cream, a seagull came and bombed me from behind. I felt it. I felt it on the edge of my ear, just come in, swooped in and took my ice cream. Well, just the ice cream bit, and I was just standing left holding the cone, much to the amusement of the group of primary school aged children standing just to the right of me, who just couldn't believe what they'd just seen, and they fell about laughing. So I'm glad I entertained them, but I spent £3.50 on a mint choc chip ice cream, and it just got swooped off by
You were robbed.
I was going to say, Bean,
I was
we have
robbed,
a WhatsApp
like
group.
properly robbed.
He was robbed. Yeah, I was going to say, because we've got a WhatsApp group for Effin Hormones, and I was going to say, as an ice cream aficionado, we could only see the empty cone, but I could see
The drip.
quite clearly the remnants of what looked like mint choc chip.
Can I just tell you what I did was, I was like, I'm eating this bloody cone. The seagull's not getting my cone, so I kind of hid. I went and sort of hid, and I sort of tried to eat it slightly under my coat so the seagulls couldn't get my cone as well. Oh yeah. Anyway,
Watch your back.
that happened within half an hour of arriving. So yeah.
Bye-bye, ice cream.
Yeah.
Oh.
These seagulls should know better than to mess with menopausal women.
God, I wasn't fast. I
Totally.
wasn't fast enough.
Have we got any menopause-related news, anybody?
I have. I had the realisation the other day that I'm post-menopausal, which was a bit of a...
What?
Oh, no way, really?
That's huge.
Wow.
I know. Weird, isn't it?
So hang on a sec. What is that like after you've had no period for a year?
Yeah.
After that? Well, let's give Terry a little clap.
Give me the clap.
Woo, a whole new life stage. A whole new life.
Oh,
Give her the clap.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
We're mates, right? But we're not that close.
Sorry. Toilet humour started early.
Oh, dear.
It's a bit sort of bittersweet, really, because it's like, oh, great, I suddenly realised I've got loads of pads and tampons and everything, and I'm like, I haven't actually used these in such a long time. Like, I've got, like, you know, you keep a stash. Yeah, but I've not used them. I've not needed them. And I was like, when was the last time I had a period? And it's way over a year. And then I was like, gosh, I really am. And then when I given myself the label, I was like, oh, does that mean I'm postmenopausal? Which it does. And I was like, oh my God, postmenopausal women are old. But I'm not old, and I'm not old-headed particularly. Well, I can be. But, you know, it was just a bit of a realisation. It was a bit of a shock, really, when I realised. But I'm going to have to start embracing it now.
It's massive. It is.
I know. Yeah.
You are. Terry, all the best people are. I realised it about a year ago as well. So I'm about 3 years past now, I think.
It's a weird feeling, though, isn't it? When you realise that whole sort of era of your life is gone and it's not going to come back. It's a strange feeling.
I can still remember how I felt when it all first started, because my mum had talked to me about it, and I was like, you know, when you're really serious when you're a kid, you're like, right, yeah, okay, you know, it felt really serious. And then the day it happened, I was like, wow.
It's proper rite of passage stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, it felt very momentous, very momentous.
Yeah. And what's this nappy for?
Oh God, they were back then, weren't they? They were.
Sanitary towels in the 80s.
You waddled like a penguin.
We're all like John Wayne.
Wow.
At least you don't have to worry about that. And you should, honestly, guys, if you could see Terry she's waddling on the screen. It's quite a picture. At least you've left that behind.
Oh, thank God, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it before. It is the best thing about the menopause is that just not having to worry about periods. And I just remember I was watching Ted Lasso last night, and there's a scene where Keely gets caught on the toilet and she doesn't realise her period's come and she hasn't got any tampons in her bag. And I was thinking, I'd been in that situation so many times of being totally unprepared because I was so clueless. I'd never know when my period was coming. And that anxiety of being out and not having a tampon. And I don't have to go through that anymore. So that's brilliant. So I'm quite glad about that.
I have a male friend that I always got caught short whenever I was in his company. And it was always him who had to go and get my tampons. And it was timed for when I'd see him. And he lived in the flat below me, and we were friends at uni, and then we were friends afterwards. We're still friends. He was my best man as well at my wedding. But it always seemed to happen whenever he was around. I won't mention him because it'll embarrass him. But it always seemed to happen that I used to go, oh, you won't do me a massive favour and get me some tampons while you're out. But it always seemed to happen with him. And he just used to look at me and go, are you timing it? So, you know... Anyway, sorry, yeah, just remembering those moments of horror when you're in your 20s and 30s is just, yeah.
All gone. No more.
No more. I remember my worst, I was on an island off the northeast coast of Thailand, and we were staying in a hut that had no electricity, and I couldn't find any tampons, and I couldn't find a shop that sold them either, and I must have walked around the entire island and took about a day to try and find tampons.
Do you have to try and mime it?
Practically in tears by the end of it. By the time I found a tampon, I was so excited. Oh dear. Yeah, no, I don't miss those days. So it's time now for you to hear from our guest for this episode. Meera Bhogal is a menopause expert, personal trainer and fitness coach who runs a platform called Meera's Made from Scratch. There are training plans and clubs on there, there's recipes and events. Well, don't worry, she'll tell you all about it very soon. Meera's really passionate about raising awareness of menopause, particularly in South Asian communities. She's even been to Parliament to talk about it. And if you bought Dr Louise Newson's latest book, The Definitive Guide to Perimenopause and Menopause, then you'll have read all about her, as Meera contributed to that as well. So welcome, Meera. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
Well, we'll get on to hearing all about the menopause, but first, if you can remember that far back, what was life like before the menopause?
Oh gosh, what was life back? I mean, it was a very long time ago. Well, I was a single mum for a while. I've got 2 girls. I was busy running my business. Just always been really active, really busy. Life was just, I was going, was just never home, really sociable, out and about all the time, loved being with people and exercising. I was a runner. I loved spinning, so I'd done half marathons. So just a full-on life. Yeah, full-on life.
So I probably know the answer to this question, but were you fully prepared for the menopause? Did you know exactly what was going to happen? Did you know what to expect?
No. Absolutely not. I had no idea. I thought I actually genuinely just I'd never really heard of it. And what I had heard was just, you're old. You've got to be old. So I kind of was thinking 70, 80, that kind of thing. So when you're old, this happens. But what it was that happened, I didn't know. I didn't even know what that meant, what menopause meant at all. Not on my radar. Didn't even know the vocabulary. Had no idea at all. There are kind of moments in your life where you and they stick with you. And it was literally my 40th birthday. I'd organised a party with friends, and I was getting ready and getting my dress and everything on, and I'd been to the hairdressers for a blow dry, and it was all just lovely. And I just froze before we went out, and I said to my husband, I don't want to go. And he's just like, what on earth? What do you mean? Come on, it's fine. You'll be all right. Let's have a drink and you'll be fine. And I was like, no, I don't want to go because my hair is thinning. I don't feel I'm getting palpitations. I feel really anxious and I don't know why I don't want to go. And he was like, no, your hair's fine. It looks really, the whole thing, being really supportive. Anyway, we did go. But that didn't leave me. And that really, to me, looking back, was one of the first things I remember where my hair was thinning and I was losing hair. But there was no connection to menopause at that point at all. I just thought it was genetic because in my family, everyone's got thin hair and they're losing hair. The anxiety and palpitations and things I just put down to, I've got an irregular heartbeat, or actually I was a bit anxious about the birthday and being with people and, I don't know. So you kind of just fob it all off and it's just like, oh, I'm tired or I'm this or I'm that, I'm not eating well or whatever it might be.
The anxiety was new for you then. That was sort of a
I've never really had panic attacks. I didn't even know what was happening to me. I didn't understand that I was anxious. It was only through speaking to Harry, my husband, who's a pharmacist, that he was sort of like, okay, it sounds like you're quite anxious. And I'm like, really? How does that even come about? There's no history of it in the family or anything like that. So I didn't really have any, again, it's not on my radar. And the aching joints, that was bad. That was bad too, to the point where I had to stop running because, again, another moment where, if you're a doer and you're one of these people that just do it, you just get on with it. I was talking to somebody else today who, when you're raising your kids and my daughter says to me, I've got a grandson, and my daughter says to me, Mum, how did you do it? I've got you and Harry and she's got a husband and she's got all of us around her. How did you do it? Just like looking after two of us. And I just said, I didn't have a choice. I had to just get on with it. And that was the sort of same thing that I was putting into place with all these symptoms. Just get on with it. What is wrong with you? You're turning into a hypochondriac, or you just, so these aching joints, I actually realized I had to stop running when I got to a point. I was doing a half marathon. Was it the Bath half marathon? I can't remember which one. I had to take a painkiller to get to the finish line. And I was like, what are you doing to yourself?
Was there a sense that you were saying to yourself, oh, this is just normal because I'm getting old, and there was no understanding of the menopause?
I wasn't blaming age. I actually thought I had some serious illness and disease. I thought I had cancer, or I had, at certain stages, I thought I had Alzheimer's, dementia. I just thought I had something seriously wrong with me.
So did you go to the doctors?
I did. I went twice, actually. After that, I gave up. The first, actually 3 times. So I went to see the nurse, and it was for a smear test. And I said to her at the point at that time, and I just said, I think I'm experiencing these kind of symptoms. And, I sort of said a few, and I said, I think I'm going through menopause. And she said, how old are you? And I said, 43 or 4, whatever it was. I can't even remember. It's quite young. So it started in my 40s, about 43 or something. And she said, oh, no, absolutely not. No way. Far too young. Okay. So there is something wrong with me. Anyway, went away, thought, okay, that's so the... and then I went to the doctor for anxiety because it had got really, really bad. And, she talked to me, and it was a really lovely thing. But there was no mention of menopause. I was just given antidepressants. And I came home and I said to my husband, Harry, I said, I've got no issues taking these antidepressants, but I don't feel I need this. And this is such a common story. I've worked with so many women now. If I could tell you that this was a unique story.
Oh, we've heard it so many times, Meera.
Yeah, and I didn't take them. I just knew. And if I needed them, I would have taken them. So I kept saying to her, I've got nothing against medication or anything like that. I just knew it wasn't right. And then I went back another time and said again, I think, to the nurse, I think I'm going through menopause. And then again, it was like, no, you're still too young to be going through menopause. And technically they were right. I wasn't going through menopause. I was going through perimenopause. I didn't know the word perimenopause. I didn't know I should be using the right terminology and going to them with a list of symptoms and putting it all together and say, this is what I'm going through. But in all fairness, Harry, my husband, did say to me, why don't you go on HRT? We're talking 15 years ago, and I said, we did some research, and he said, look, yeah, all right. I said, well, what's it made of? He said it's horse urine, which it was at the time. And
was it?
I just said, yeah,
was
it
it
used to be
horse
made from horse urine.
Yeah, it was back in the
gosh.
day.
I didn't know that.
Back in the day, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's moved on a lot since then.
It's come on a
Sounds
lot
delightful,
since
isn't
then. And also then there was still that research that was around, which is now we know is kind of was falsely put together and is not correct information, which was around at the time based on the research, on that massive research study in America, where it actually just, you're going to die of breast cancer. So your risk of breast cancer increases, don't take HRT. And so I was like, firstly, I'm not going to take horse urine. Secondly, I don't want to die of breast cancer because I just think there's so much going wrong with me already. No, flat out, I'm not doing it. I'm going to do it my own way. I've got to work this out myself because no one's helping me. So back then, I mean, it's crazy how things have come along. But that was the only information I got.
So when was it for you that the penny really dropped and you went, this is perimenopause? Or was it a gradual kind of realisation when you sort of realised I'm not dying? Because it's quite a thing, isn't it? That we don't know the word perimenopause, we don't know the word menopause, and your brain automatically goes to cancer because we're so exposed to that. Our first thought, even just a few years ago, would not have been, actually, I wonder if this is perimenopause or menopause. It just goes, oh my God, I've got leukemia, I've got a brain tumour, my heart's about to give out,
I've got Alzheimer's. Yeah.
But
I've got anxiety,
all of
yeah.
it. And actually it's just a collection of hormones that are just gradually depleting that are causing all these symptoms. So when did the penny drop? When was it for you?
It was very gradual because, what am I now, 54, nearly 55. So I'm postmenopausal 3 years, probably about 6 or 7 years ago. So it's very recent for me. And that's when I started to talk about it because I realised I felt like I'd been kind of robbed of almost 8 years of my life. Literally, I was going, if you could list every single menopause symptom, I pretty much had all of them. They went in phases and stages. So I didn't really put it all together and think, oh, right, this is perimenopause and it could last 10 years. Until about 5 or 6 years ago when I started to really look into it, because people were asking me more and more, what is menopause? And actually, the reason I actually sort of going back a couple of steps, the reason I started to talk about it was because when I would speak to other women and I would say, do you think you could be going through menopause or like the early perimenopause and stuff? They'd be going like, no, what's that? It's a disease. We don't get it. It's a disease. Or South Asian women would say, it's a white person's disease. Or they would say,
Really?
I'm not going to get it if yes, honest to God, and I'm not going to get it if I keep myself fit and healthy. Okay. So I was just like, okay, I've got to do something about this because you're gonna be hit. You could be half of the population of women that are going to have to make significant changes to your lifestyle because you are going to be hit with symptoms that are going to really affect you. If you're lucky, you're the 1 in 4 that goes through it, breezes through it. But actually, your risk to osteoporosis, your risk to heart disease, the reason you've got diabetes, the reason perhaps your thyroid isn't working, you're bloating, you're getting lots of hay fever, headaches. All of these things that you're talking to me about is not because you're not eating well or exercising well. It could be because your hormones are changing. And yes, we do need to look at exercise and eating, but actually we need to acknowledge the fact that this is what is happening. And it is a natural process that happens to every single woman. And still to this day, I was at a talk yesterday in Northampton. And I'm not talking about people who haven't accessed education. I'm talking about, the demographic of people who, well-educated people. I've actually even had dentists and people talk to me as well, say the same thing to me. A lady yesterday said to me, she said, so when is this going to stop? Like, my periods have finished. So she's postmenopausal. And she said, when is this going to stop? I said, what? She said, this menopause thing. It's like, no. We are postmenopausal. That's it. That's how you are. You are going to be living like this for the rest of your life. We have to do something about it. And she literally nearly cried. She went, I can't go on like this. I kept thinking it was going to end. So, and that's sad. That is why I do what I do. I do that. I drove all the way to Northampton. Wonderful set of 30 women who were there. But, I'm going to a Gurdwara Sikh temple on Saturday in Coventry and speaking to another set of women. And my husband's coming this time. We're talking about relationships, which is really forward thinking for a lot of these places to go.
That's really that's really something.
Oh, no, thank you. But my point going back to it is I didn't put the pieces together about perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause until I'd been going through it and trying to help myself for about probably 6 years, 5 or 6 years. So I do feel like if I'd known about HRT back then, the way it is now, if it was the same, I don't even know, I would have gone on it without a doubt. I would not have struggled the way I did. I'm not on it now because, I'm postmenopausal. My symptoms are slightly different. I do notice fluctuations still in my hormones. I'm still getting certain symptoms. They're less. Life is very different postmenopause. Perimenopause was fairly horrific.
You've mentioned sort of South Asian communities, and I have to say, I am a minority on this podcast, which I don't mean that on it, but it is great to have someone from a South Asian background as well. And I think I count myself really fortunate because my mum went through a very early menopause and I started to go through an early menopause. And so mum was very good at talking to us about it. And we had a front row seat. We were we were quite young and seeing it all play out. But as I got older, I realised that a lot of my friends' mums, when they just weren't talking about it, a lot of my Indian friends' mums going to the temple and stuff. I mean, even like talking about periods was a no-no, never mind menopause. There wasn't a word. I don't even think, is there a word for it in any of the Indian, Asian, South Asian languages? There's not a word for it, is there?
No, there isn't.
It's crazy, isn't it?
And
yeah,
I mean, so it's weird that why do you think there's such a cultural taboo around it?
I think being you hit pretty much the nail on the head in that women's health is just taboo. Women aren't given that value. Yes, we might be loved and, all of the rest of those things, but we're not actually given that space and that understanding. We don't have the words or the vocabulary to talk about what's going on. And women's health is just not given any importance whatsoever. You have a baby, you just get on with it. Even when you're pregnant, you're not meant to really show it. You're not meant to talk about being pregnant for a certain amount of time. And it's all very kind of, periods
are dirty.
You're not meant to go to the temple.
Unclean. You're not meant to go to the temple.
Not meant to go.
Yeah, all of that stuff.
Right. When you have a period, you're not meant to go to the temple or all of this stuff. So if we're brought up in that environment, you're not going to talk about it. You're not going to know about it. And a lot of Asian women don't actually even know that's what they're going through.
I'm brought up a Hindu. And you go to the temple and you've got a god and a goddess. For every god, there's a goddess. There's a female form, yeah?
Yeah.
And you go in for a faith that has a female so front and centre of their worship. How is it that women's health, pregnancy, oh, God forbid you have a girl, not a boy, and I mean, that's a whole other conversation. The fact that periods don't come to the temple, don't come here, don't come there, you're unclean. And then as you progress in life, it's almost like I think women were just expected to just hide away and go and be old in a corner.
Yeah.
And I guess in warm, hot countries, hot cultures, if you became a widow, you'd on a white sari and you never go anywhere. You just sort of... So do you think it's part and parcel of like that? Like I just can't correlate the two, where you've got a faith that's just got women at the centre of worship and then yet there's no conversation around it.
Yeah. I think, what I truly believe, so again, my mum, like your mum, I was very lucky. So my mum was very forward thinking in that, I would say to her, oh, I'm on my period and I shouldn't be. And I was told, I'd never heard it before, actually. I just heard it through friends and stuff. And I said to her, I'm not meant to go to the temple because I've got my period. And she just turned around and she went, but look, that goddess that's a goddess. That's a goddess. Where do we have babies? Like if we don't have a period, we can't have babies. And therefore we, just forget it. She's like, just don't tell anyone. Why do you need to tell anybody? I was like, okay, I don't need to tell anyone. I'll go.
Yeah, my family were pretty forward thinking on that front as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there is a difference between what we're indoctrinated with culturally, and what religion actually says. So I think there is a real disparity between that. Okay. And it's that interpretation, right. It's the interpretation of religion. So I always say to, even with people that don't eat meat and don't eat this, don't eat that, I always say, that's how you're brought up. You're told, well, you're not meant to eat this because it's religious, and you're not meant to eat that. And I sometimes, when you strip religion right back, it quite often doesn't have any of that indoctrination. No, it literally is us as humans.
My dad used to say exactly that. My dad is a massive feminist, actually. Again, I look back and realise how just not a typical Indian dad my dad is. And he'd say, again, if you look at the scripture, or I don't even know if it is in scripture, he said, really, instead of not going to the temple, what we talk about what's supposed to happen, or what he interpreted, and my mum, was that when you're on your period, you're meant to rest.
Yeah.
So you withdraw from cooking and cleaning and all that, right? And somehow it's been, they were like, it's been flipped somehow. And it's now become, you're unclean, don't go to the temple. And actually it was meant to be, no, you're having a period, you're ovulating, whatever, go rest. Yeah. So how, are you sort of working actively to break the taboo? Actively going to temples and speaking to... Tell us what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I will go wherever anybody will have me. I literally will. I will go and speak to anyone and anywhere. So if I can be, like I said, I've not been invited to a temple yet, but I've been invited to a couple of Gurdwaras. The Northampton event was actually at a Gurdwara as well. And everybody seems to be up north. It's down here that we seem to, in London, that there seems to be an issue. Not an issue, but I think we're just less, perhaps. I just find that, interestingly enough, Birmingham, Coventry, Northampton, they all seem to be quite willing. A particular part of the demographic seem to be quite willing to learn and listen. The elder generation may be a little bit kind of not quite there, but even Harry's mom and dad, they don't talk about what I do, because I get it. I can't force it down people's throats. I need to be respectful of everyone's, wishes and stuff like that. But they know I do this stuff, and they know I've been to Parliament, and they know I have papers that have been published in different places, and I go to Gurdwaras, and if I said to them, could I have a talk, could you arrange one for me where you are at your Gurdwara, they would do it. But it's difficult because it's one person at a time. Somebody said this to me yesterday or the day before. It was like, it's just exhausting. I said, yeah, it is exhausting. If you think you're going to change a whole room full of people in one go, you're not. You literally have to battle one person at a time and hope that one person will then educate the next person and educate the next person. You can't expect more than that.
But what sort of reaction do you get when you go to the temples? I know you gave us one example. Have you got any others? What sort of reaction do you get in general?
Do you know, one of the loveliest ones that I did was one of the first ones I did. And again, I don't organise these events. These are people coming to me and saying, would you do this? And I'm like, yeah, perfect, love to. There was about 8 or 10 women, and it was actually in the Gurdwara itself. We had a room. They'd allowed us to have a room. There was a chap there. There was a guy there. My husband there as well. And then it was mainly women. But actually, it was mums and daughters as well that had come. And it was the revelation of the mums who were in their 60s or 70s talking about because they suddenly were like, oh my God, this is exactly what happened to me. All of the symptoms that you were saying, what was happening to me at that time, then postmenopausal now, but this is what happened to me, and I wasn't able to talk about it. And I was fobbed off by the doctor. And we're talking about 25, 30 years ago, some of them, if they were older in their 70s. And their daughters would be sitting there going, I didn't know you went through this. I didn't know you had this happen to you. I didn't know. And then all the stories started pouring out about miscarriages and about how like doctors didn't listen to them and how, just like outpouring. And I just, there are times when I am exhausted. Like yesterday I was exhausted, 11 o'clock we got back home, and I don't do very well late nights because I'm an early riser to practice my yoga and the whole thing. And my day starts quite early. But that is what keeps you going. That's what keeps me going. That's what keeps Harry supporting me and my girls supporting me, is that, if one person or two people feel like they've been heard, that's important. Yesterday somebody said, again, was introducing me and said, Meera's not a celebrity. She said she's the one who actually goes around and visits all these places. And I just thought that was really lovely. But, my point being is sometimes those people become unrelatable. And I think that's the difference. So it is about representation. Right? Yeah. And representation really, really, really matters. I have a group of 4 girls, like you 4, and I'm the only Indian in the group. And I couldn't turn even to my own girlfriends who are all white. I couldn't turn to them and have that conversation because it just wasn't.
You weren't programmed to be able to say it.
Yeah, I couldn't explain to them how difficult it was for me.
I know.
And they were going through their own journeys. It was open and we were all talking about it, but I just couldn't find the language to speak to them with it. It was just something, I don't know.
I think that is something, because I remember like when I was younger, when I was a teenager, when I lived at home still, we were going to the temple as a family and trying to, because I grew up in a very white area. Most of my friends are white, and that's fine. Like I've never kind of felt torn between two cultures or anything particularly like that. I've been fine. No. But I think it would be things like trying to explain the period not going to temple thing. Because also I didn't want to say it because I was ashamed of the fact that level of persecution was there. So I didn't want them to think bad of my faith and my background. But also I was still like seething about the injustice of that ridiculousness of it all. And so you find yourself just not finding, you just don't say anything. You're just like,
no.
In fact, I don't think I think the friends I grew up with, we've talked about it more recently, but I think that's probably the first time you guys have heard that, right? The rest of you.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. I mean, I'm absolutely blown away by this conversation. It's really, firstly, it's amazing what you do, Meera. What you're talking about there, those experiences are so powerful and quite incredible. And no wonder it's exhausting. Yeah. And I feel really moved by hearing you two talk in this way. I really do. Thank you.
No, it's absolutely fascinating. Terry, I think you had a question, did you?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Meera, firstly, have things improved, or can you speak to how women from South Asia are treated in the health service? Because I believe that there was a study done by a journal of, what was it called? Journal of Later Life, and it found that women from India experience menopause at an average age of around 46, whereas in the UK we say the NICE guidelines are all based around the age of 51, that is the average age for menopause. So I just wondered, in terms of the women that you meet, are they also ignored when they go to a GP and say they have symptoms? Oh, you're far too young, or is that sort of filtering through that actually women from different heritage have on average different times that they go through perimenopause and menopause? It's obviously going to have an effect on perimenopause, isn't it, if the average age for menopause is 46.2? So I just wondered if you've come across that. There's the as well as the misogyny.
Yeah. No, I think, so again, it's a really interesting point that you raise, and I'm part of a research study, a global research study, which I jumped at the opportunity to be a part of, where we're trying to get 1 million women across the globe to complete a 15 to 20 minute questionnaire. It is going to be, if we can get 1 million women, one of the largest research studies into menopause that there is. And it literally is a 15-minute questionnaire. So if I can send it to you guys, you can send it out to wherever.
We'll send it to everyone we know.
Yeah, we'll put the details on the episode notes for this podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, so because there is a lack of research, whatever little bits of research there are, and also anecdotally, even my observation and other people that work within this space, there is a huge impact of culture, socioeconomics, demographics, ethnicity. All of those things play a part on how women experience menopause. So there are some cultures in which being older and getting older and going through that time is like a rite of passage. And there are others where it's deemed as very, very negative and you're kind of put aside because you're basically a waste of space now. You're no good because you're not fertile. So that has an impact. And actually, Asian women are likely to start to experience perimenopause much earlier. An average age can be anything sort of 38, 40 for perimenopause to start. And therefore, yes, your average age of menopause then becomes much lower. But is it recognized? So your question of, do I find that a lot of women are, yes, a lot of women are going through it that I see. And I do have a menopause program that I run as well, where we look at holistically about educating women about what menopause is, and then looking at how they can support themselves through lifestyle choices. And this isn't about HRT and not HRT, but education, lifestyle choices. How do you look after yourself? And the women that I've helped, and I only take 5 or 6 women on at a time through these programs. It's a very small group because it's very intense. I've helped about 100 plus women in this kind of quite close way. A lot of them will have experienced perimenopause or be experiencing perimenopause symptoms quite early. They'll be 40, 42, 43 when they're coming to me. Some are 50, 45, 50, but on average, they're much younger and experiencing the symptoms. You've also got to kind of take into context that menopause isn't something that is really given a spotlight, the university life of medical practitioners, right? The report that I was part of for the inquiry that's come out has said that, we need to get education in for the universities, for medical students, we need to get it into schools. So all of that is being filtered through, but it will take time. We need GPs and practitioners to be able to say, oh, right, hold on a minute. So what, you've got a headache, your erratic periods, you're having vaginal dryness, it's painful to have sex, joints are aching, your hair's thinning. Okay, let's go through this whole set of symptoms. You're not sleeping, you've got hot flushes, whatever. Poor concentration, brain fog. Oh, okay, let me just join all the dots. Have you considered that you could be going through menopause, or perimenopause? It's sort of starting to change a bit, but it's not changing completely.
But I think it's specifically the cultural thing as well. So that awareness that South Asian women do start perimenopause earlier. I just think it's hilarious, the irony of the sheer number of brown doctors there are as well. Like it's kind of quite funny. And actually, I'm nodding away because, it was certainly true in my family. And it was an Asian doctor that turned around and went, nah, it can't be. No, there can't be no, it's not in the familial line. I'm like, you're telling me that breast cancer is, but menopause isn't it all hormone related? Isn't it all hormone related? And he was like, nah. And I'm like, oh, great, okay. Eventually hitting upon another female Asian doctor that I started to kind of, she must have realised this, joining the dots. Do you remember when I rang you guys and I was in the Morrison's car park and I was literally crying down the phone? I was just like, I cannot believe I've got it. So I've finally got someone who's getting it.
You were. It was a really, really big deal that someone you'd felt heard, and you'd felt
and
understood.
Culturally felt heard as well. That was a really big deal for me. It wasn't even that long ago, really. It's in the time since we've started making this. No, it's about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
But honestly, more power to you, because that's a lot of work to do still. But it's representation. Exactly what you say. It's representation and awareness.
It is, and it's podcasts like yourselves, and things that you're doing, and that makes a difference. It's that drip, 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 drip effect. You need to keep chipping away at it. But it does affect everybody. The stories I hear, I hear predominantly from South Asian women, but it is across the board where women aren't being heard. It's just women not being heard. It is about women not being heard, and that's literally what it is. And you can go into that sub sort of strata of going into the different cultures, and it's just a whole minefield straight there. But why should it's that question really, why should you have to be fighting so hard to be heard to the point where you're in tears because somebody actually hears you? Yesterday, I was talking to a doctor who was doing a speech or something, and I know her from I can't remember where I know her from, but anyway, but she was just like, would you mind having a chat with me? I'd really like to give some fluff out my speech, basically, by sort of giving experiences of other women. And she just asked some really funny questions. And she's lovely, lovely lady. But she said, so why did you not go back to the doctor? It's like, because I wasn't hurt, And I was at I was at a Bupa event, the Bupa Symposium on Monday. Brilliant, really forward-thinking session where they were talking about the future of healthcare and how it's just so dire. But what would we do to do it? How could we change it? And when I was talking about my experience, I said the reason they were talking about consumerism and a patient, right? The difference between the two, how it's changed things. So I said, well, I'm a consumer because I don't want to be a patient. So I'm doing lifestyle choices. I'm making different things. I'm doing my own research because I actually don't want to be a patient. I don't want to go to the doctor. And the reason I don't want to go to the doctor is because actually I can sit in front of and they were all GPs in the room, not GPs, but all medical practitioners in the room. And I just said, because the scary thing is I could sit opposite a GP, which is what I did. And I, at that point, know more about me and my condition than you do, that the GP does. But we were brought up to believe that GPs, not just GPs, but doctors, they're God. They are the oracle. So whatever your doctor says is right. But now I'm going to a doctor or a GP or whatever, and I don't know who to ask for. So I'm asking for my doctor who doesn't even know me, whatever, forget that. And I'm actually sitting across the table from you and you're talking rubbish. And I'm trying to say to you, no, let me just point out my symptoms to you. And this is what I could be. That is the state that we're in, which is really, really, really sad. And also you get 10 minutes and you're out. So the doctor said to me, the GP that I was talking to yesterday said to me, but I don't have time. The woman came in, I knew she needed HRT, but she started talking about her relationships and her family. And I had to stop her and say, your time's up. You need HRT. Do you want to take it?
You need the balance app, love. Go get the balance app. Yeah.
I know. We spoke to a couple of women very early on when we first started the podcast. They'd done quite a lot of research and they found on average women had gone 6 times to their GP before feeling any kind of support, which, if you just think about the amount of money that costs, I mean, and certainly I'd gone back over a period of 2 years and was just felt like I was banging my head against a brick wall, And I think it's really interesting what you're talking about there with the consumer approach to this. It's really about preventive medicine, isn't it, rather than reactive medicine.
We're getting into all the other stuff now other than HRT, and you talked earlier about a programme. I think this is your Don't Pause for Menopause programme, isn't it? What can you tell us about that?
That came about really, but it was during lockdown, as many things have come about during lockdown. A few women came up to me and, well, they were messaging me, not physically coming up to me at that time, but they were messaging me saying they were struggling and I looked like I was doing the right stuff and I seemed to be really well. And I was like, you've got no idea. Could you help us? And I was like, yeah, I can, but it's not going to work for you because it's a little bit kind of, you have to change a few bits here and there and be committed to a bit of change. And so they were like, no, we're willing to try anything. I was like, okay, that's fine. Let's do it. And it started off as a 12-week program where, we looked at their diet, we looked at what they were eating. I then supported them to start to include different nutrients, asked for their blood tests, and I work with a functional nutritionist who looks at their blood tests based around education. So there's 2 workshops I deliver on food and nutrition, meal planning, what's the importance of fat, exercise, what do we need, what is menopause? And then I have a functional nutritionist that works with me and she does a lot on the hormones and all of that side of stuff and supplements and what do we need. But she also looks at the blood tests and speaks to everybody and, gives them feedback individually. And I work with them individually and look at their lifestyle and where we can put different foods in and education on food, nutrition, what do they need? And we also have a psychotherapist on board as well. Everybody goes, why do you have a psychotherapist? And I said, because we need support to understand how to shift our mindset, number one, but also a lot of what we do in our life is very emotive, right? And sometimes we're not getting the support we need from our family, from our friends, from everybody. You're kind of alone. So the psychotherapist is hugely important, this group session that we have. And we offer exercise daily, which is tailored towards women who are going through this stage of life. We do yoga once a week, which is kind of yoga for sleep. So it's not kind of a dynamic yoga. It's literally a holistic approach. And I am sitting on your shoulder teaching you about micronutrients, macronutrients, challenging things like intermittent fasting. Is it right for you? Challenging things like, I was told I only need to eat 800 calories or 1,200 calories, and challenging people's perceptions of, I've got to go gluten or dairy free, or I've got to run every day for 10 kilometers, anything. So it literally is a program where people learn about themselves.
Do you think all this happens sort of alongside HRT? Then it's not a one or other, is it really?
Never. It's about empowering women to be able to make choices. It's your choice what you do. You should have a toolbox of different things that you can pull out, and HRT should be one of them. It's not. And you hear people go, "Oh, I don't want to do HRT because I want to do it the natural way." And I always say, have you ever taken any form of contraception? Taken it. Well, okay, so you have. If you have, what do you think HRT is? We are bringing in hormones to help you if that is what you need. What is it? No one's going to give you a badge for suffering, it just isn't going to happen.
Well said.
Love that. Well, I just wanted to ask quickly about yoga, because I read that you do Ashtanga yoga,
Yes.
and we're all massive. Well, we're all big Yoga with Adrian fans here on Effin Hormones, and I do yoga every single day. Honestly, couldn't cope without it. Just 20 minutes, I see Ashtanga yoga popping up a lot. I mean, is there a particular type of yoga that's better for menopause or perimenopause, or does it not matter?
No, yoga is, there are different fractions of yoga, like there are different fractions of so many things. And yoga really is a practice that is about turning inwards and inward reflection and inward. It literally is that focus on self, that focus on your breath, that focus on really creating space in your body for you, calming your mind down, bringing it into space. So, yoga is not really about getting into poses. The poses are tools we need to use to be able to help our body and our mind feel kind of work in one and work in harmony.
Here. Like for me, it's Iyengar. It's what works for you. It's what works for you. And I think, unfortunately, yoga's been plagued by, sorry to say it, but the Americanization and the McDonaldization.
Oh, it has.
And, it's almost like there's about 50 billion schools of yoga. It's just, you go to India and yes, there are certain schools, but yoga's yoga, man. Like, just whatever works for you. Yes, there are different schools, aren't there, right?
I chose Ashtanga because for me, the drive was, it's dynamic. I'm going to learn how to do this, and I'm going to be jumping around and weird and wonderful things. And actually just realize, oh, hold on a minute. It's not about that at all. Actually, you can't continue practicing yoga if you don't start to turn inwards and start to actually use it for what you need to use it for. So yes, there are some people who need to do it for different things. And for me, like what you were saying, Helen, for me, it was my lifeline and still is to this day. So I practice a Mysore style of yoga. Basically, that means you can kind of turn up to class at any time. Because Ashtanga is a sequence, you kind of know where you're at in the sequence, and then you get taught the next sequence. And that's actually what I like, because I like routine. I like knowing what I'm doing. I hate going to a class and then 1 minute you're going here and the next minute you're going there, and I'm like, okay. So vinyasa flow is a bit tricky for me in my brain sometimes. So Ashtanga works for me well because I know I'm going to do the same thing or whatever. It's breath work, and that's what we try and teach. That's what I try and deliver when I do my yoga sessions for the ladies, for the people on the program. And, I do a training club, so I do an online platform, which is live and on-demand exercise classes, like 30 minutes per session and stuff, just accessible, But if people understood, going back to that menopause thing, if people understood the significance of cortisol, because that's not talked about. You've got, if you are stressed, stress is a trigger. They're saying now stress is a trigger for menopause and perimenopause. But stress, when you're stressed, that cortisol, your body has to stop doing everything that it needs to do in order to produce that cortisol. And if, we need cortisol, it's really important for us, but in bursts. That's how we were designed. So you're running for a bus, you're doing an exam, there's a tiger chasing you, whatever it may be, right? Yes, gosh, you need that cortisol right there, but you don't need right now, we've got cortisol all the time because you've got something to do for the kids, you've got something to do for your parents, you've got something to do for somebody else, you've got a deadline in your work, you've got a bus to catch, you're then late for a next appointment, you're doing a podcast and you're not there, or whatever it may be, you've got to make dinner. It is a constant stream.
Oh, that's my life,
of
Meera.
cortisol.
You basically just
But that's
described my
cortisol.
life.
That's our lives. It's our lives. It's my life. I have to be really careful. And that constant cortisol can become a comfort because we're like, what do we do when we what do you mean I'm not going to be running around? Because that cortisol it becomes a comfort, becomes a state of living. And that chronic cortisol has an impact on how well our body is able to produce hormones, particularly estrogen itself, but also B, how it's able to digest food, insulin levels, how your lipids are all absorbed, and assimilated. So one of the most important things we can do for menopause literally is to think about meditation, mindfulness, or yoga. And it doesn't need to be a big thing, can be small. But
You're speaking my language there, Meera, telling you. Yeah.
You're amazing. I think my favourite quote has to be, no one's going to give you a badge for suffering.
I love it.
I love that.
that comes from my mum. She was one of the first, I was so shocked when she said to me, when I had my daughters, and this is what I mean, she's just like this thing of information. She's just amazing. She said to me, you better feed yourself first before you feed the children. I was like, what? No, I've got to feed the kids first. She went, no, you feed yourself first so you can then feed the kids. Otherwise you're going to be hungry and you're going to get ill and you're not going to look after yourself. So she's always like, look after yourself first and you're able to give to others. I'm like, wow, it's so, it's
Wow.
so true. It's so
So
good.
true.
But yeah,
So simple but true.
amazing person. Yeah. No.
Big up Meera's mum.
Yay.
That was awesome, Meera.
That was
Absolutely
music
awesome.
to our ears.
Woo.
Thank you
you.
so much, Meera, for joining us. That was brilliant.
Yay.
Thank you so
Got so
much.
much from that, Meera.
I
Thank
loved
you.
it. I had such a lovely chat. You guys are amazing.
Oh.
Oh.
Honestly.
And that is it for this episode of Effin Hormones. Thank you so much, Meera, for sharing your story. You can catch us again in around a month's time. Remember, of course, if you can donate a couple of quid to keep us going, then please do check out effinhormones.com. Just scroll till you see Be an Effin Star, click on the star, and that takes you through to our GoFundMe page. A big thank you, gang. Cheers. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Aw.